Ethan Cross stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, his calloused hands gripping the edge of the marble countertop. 20 years of construction work had built his company from the ground up, and those same hands had provided everything his family enjoyed. The sprawling 5-bedroom house, the luxury cars in the garage, the country club membership his wife, Victoria, flaunted like a crown. The sound of her laughter drifted up from downstairs, accompanied by the deeper rumble of their son Ian's voice. The familiar noise made his jaw clench. "Another day in paradise," he muttered, straightening his silk tie. 2 decades of marriage had taught him that sarcasm was sometimes the only way to cope with the growing distance between what he'd hoped his family would be and what it had become. The master bathroom, with its heated floors and double vanity, represented everything that had gone wrong in his marriage. Victoria had insisted on the renovation last year, claiming their perfectly functional bathroom was embarrassingly dated. The project had cost nearly 6 figures, and she'd barely thanked him before finding something else to complain about. Ethan's morning routine had become a ritual of restraint. Each action was measured, controlled, a physical representation of how he handled his wife and son's increasingly toxic behavior. The precise knot of his tie, the careful combing of his salt and pepper hair, the methodical shaving of his strong jaw, all done with purpose, all reminders that control came from within. The sound of shattering glass broke through his thoughts, followed by Victoria's sharp voice. "Nina, can't you do anything right? This is why we can't have nice things." Ethan's fingers tightened on his tie, the silk creasing under his grip. Their 13-year-old daughter's quiet apology barely reached his ears, but he could picture her face. Drawn in, shoulders hunched, trying to make herself smaller in the face of her mother's disproportionate anger. Unlike Ian, Nina had never learned to weaponize Victoria's narcissism for her own gain. Downstairs, Victoria lounged on their European leather sofa, scrolling through her phone while Ian leaned against the kitchen counter. At 17, their son was already taller than Ethan, with his mother's striking features and the same casual arrogance in his stance. Nina knelt on the floor, carefully picking up pieces of a broken glass, her movements cautious and precise. "Here, let me help," Ethan said, moving to grab the dustpan. "Don't bother," Victoria cut in, not looking up from her phone. "She needs to learn to clean up her own messes, though goodness knows she makes enough of them." Ian snickered, the sound making Ethan's teeth grind. "Yeah, Dad, stop enabling her. Mom's right. Nana's such a klutz." "I'm not a klutz," Nina whispered, her voice barely audible. The glass was wet. It slipped. "Excuses, excuses," Victoria sang, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. "Oh my gosh, Ian, you have to see what Jessica posted. She's totally trying to get my attention again." The rapid shift in Victoria's focus, from berating her daughter to gossiping with her son, was typical of her behavior. Ethan had watched this pattern repeat itself countless times over the years. Victoria would lash out, then immediately turn to Ian for validation, the two of them forming an impenetrable bubble of shared narcissism. "Mom, you should see her latest story too," Ian said, holding up his own phone. He stepped over the broken glass and his sister without a glance, dropping onto the sofa beside Victoria. Their heads bent together over their phones, identical expressions of malicious glee on their faces. Ethan helped Nina finish cleaning up the glass, his movements efficient and quiet. He could feel his daughter's gratitude in the way she leaned slightly toward him, seeking the protection he represented. The gulf between his children had never been more apparent. Ian, the golden child who could do no wrong in his mother's eyes, and Nina, the scapegoat who bore the brunt of Victoria's capricious moods. "Oh my goodness, she's wearing that hideous Gakshi knockoff again." Victoria laughed, her voice carrying that familiar note of casual cruelty. "Someone needs to tell her she's not fooling anyone, right?" Ian smirked. "Like at least spring for the real thing if you're trying to fake it. Not everyone can pull off designer like you do, Mom." Ethan moved to the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee drawing him in. He poured himself a cup, the familiar routine giving him a moment to compose himself. Through the doorway, he could see Victoria preening under Ian's calculated flattery. Their relationship had always disturbed him, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was so obviously transactional. Ian had learned early on that praising his mother's vanity earned him special privileges and protection. Speaking of designer, Victoria called out, finally deigning to acknowledge her husband, "I need the black card today. There's a private sale at Hyman and Joy." "The credit limit is almost maxed," Ethan replied evenly, though his grip on the coffee mug tightened. "Your last shopping spree hasn't even been paid off yet." Victoria's face darkened. "Are you seriously going to nickel and dime me, Ethan? After everything I do for this family?" "Yeah, Dad," Ian chimed in, his tone dripping with disdain. "Mom deserves nice things. It's not her fault you're so fiscally conservative." He said the last words like they were an insult, sharing a knowing look with his mother. Ethan took a long sip of his coffee, letting the bitter liquid wash away the words he wanted to say. The morning routine had become a masterclass in restraint, watching his wife and son tear others down while building themselves up, their shared narcissism feeding off each other like a particularly toxic symbiosis. "Dad, you're hovering again," Ian called out, not bothering to look up from his phone. "It's creepy how you just stand there and stare." "I'm drinking coffee in my own kitchen," Ethan replied, his voice level despite the anger simmering beneath. "And you're going to be late for school if you don't leave soon." Victoria finally looked up, her perfectly lined eyes narrowing. "He's right, Ian, you should go. But remember what we talked about the party this weekend." The way they exchanged glances made Ethan's stomach tighten. He'd seen that look before. It usually preceded some new scheme or demand, with Ian acting as his mother's willing accomplice. The last time they'd shared that look, it had ended with Victoria demanding a new DMS SUV because her 2-year-old DMS sedan was embarrassingly outdated. "Oh yeah," Ian's face lit up with that calculating smile Ethan had come to dread. "Dad, we need to discuss something important tonight. Family meeting kind of thing." Ethan set his mug down carefully, the gentle clink of ceramic on granite masking the tension in his movements. "I have a late meeting today. Project deadline." "Cancel it," Victoria said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Her eyes took on that familiar manipulative gleam. "This is important, Ethan. It's about our marriage." The words hung in the air like a threat. Ethan turned to face them fully, taking in Victoria's practiced pout and Ian's barely concealed smirk. Their younger daughter chose that moment to reappear in the doorway, her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. "I'm ready for school, Dad," Nina said quietly, her eyes darting between her parents with the hyper-vigilance of a child who'd learned to read emotional weather patterns for survival. "I'll drive you," Ethan said, grateful for the excuse to escape. He turned to his son. "Ian, you want a ride?" "Please," Ian scoffed, already heading for the garage where his new DMS, an 18th birthday present Victoria, had insisted on, despite Ethan's objections, waited. "I'm not being seen in your boring Dadmobile." The contrast between his children had never been more stark. While Nina had remained grounded and empathetic, Ian had absorbed every ounce of his mother's materialism and entitlement. The DMS had been a perfect example. While Nina had asked for art supplies and books for her birthday, Ian had demanded a luxury car, backed by Victoria's insistence that appearances matter in this community. As Ethan guided Nina toward his car, a practical Braxton sedan that Victoria had dubbed embarrassingly middle management, he tried to ignore the sound of Ian's DMS roaring out of the garage, music blaring at an inconsiderate volume. The drive to Nina's middle school was quiet at first, but Ethan could feel his daughter's tension. At 13, she was already more perceptive than he sometimes wished. She'd developed an almost preternatural ability to sense when storms were brewing in their family dynamic. "Dad," she finally asked as they waited at a red light, her voice small but steady, Are you and Mom fighting again? Ethan glanced at his daughter, seeing in her young face a wisdom beyond her years. She'd inherited his darker coloring and steady nature, standing in sharp contrast to Ian's flashier looks and volatile personality. While his son had become Victoria's mirror image, Nina remained steadfastly her own person. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, he wondered if they were true. The look Victoria and Ian had shared, the mention of making things more exciting. His instincts were screaming that something significant was about to change in their family dynamic. As they pulled up to the school, Nina hesitated before reaching for the door handle. "I heard Mom and Ian talking yesterday," she said quietly, "about how boring everything is lately, how you're holding them back." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow, not because they were surprising, but because they confirmed his worst suspicions about the conversations that happened when he wasn't around. He turned to face his daughter fully, seeing the worry in her dark eyes. "Listen to me, Nina," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Whatever happens, whatever your mother and brother might say or do, I want you to remember something. You are not responsible for their happiness or their choices. Understand?" Nina nodded, but her eyes filled with tears. "I just don't want everything to fall apart." "Hey." Ethan reached over and pulled her into a quick hug, feeling her small frame shake slightly. "Some things need to fall apart before they can be rebuilt properly. But I promise you, whatever happens, you and we're solid. Okay." "Okay," Nina whispered, wiping her eyes quickly. She gave him a wavering smile before climbing out of the car, adjusting her backpack with determined movements. Ethan watched her walk into the school building, her shoulders straight despite the emotional weight she carried. Once she disappeared inside, he allowed himself a moment of raw emotion. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, and he let out a slow, controlled breath. Whatever Victoria and Ian had planned, he knew it wouldn't be good. It never was. But watching Nina walk away, carrying the burden of their family's dysfunction, something shifted inside him. Maybe it was time to stop maintaining peace at any cost. Maybe it was time to show his wife and son that actions have consequences. That thought stayed with him as he drove to work, a seed of resolution taking root in fertile ground. The Cross Construction headquarters stood as a testament to Ethan's success, a modern, 3-story building of glass and steel that he had designed himself. As he pulled into his reserved parking space, his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Don't forget to leave that credit card on the counter before you go. There's a sale I can't miss." Ethan ignored the message, pocketing his phone as he walked into the building. His employees greeted him with genuine respect, not the false deference Victoria's country club friends showed her. Here, in the world he built from nothing, Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "Morning, boss." Derek Walters, his project manager of 15 years, fell in step beside him. "Got those revised blueprints for the hillside development, but you look like you could use coffee first." In his office, Derek closed the door and fixed Ethan with a knowing look. "Rough morning at home." Ethan settled behind his desk, running a hand over his face. "Victoria and Ian are up to something. They want a family meeting tonight." "Those two," Derek shook his head. "No offense, boss, but your wife and son," he trailed off diplomatically, "are a matched set of narcissists." Ethan finished, a rare moment of candor with his oldest friend. "Tell me something I don't know." "You know what my divorce lawyer said when I was going through my split." Derek leaned forward, his voice low. "Document everything. Every expense, every conversation, every incident, just in case." Ethan's fingers drummed on his desk. "I'm not getting divorced, Derek." "Maybe not, but 20 years in construction taught us both. Better to have foundation work you don't need than need it, and not have it." The conversation was interrupted by Ethan's phone buzzing again. This time it was Ian. "Mom's pretty upset you're ignoring her. Real mature, Dad. Better not ruin tonight's discussion with your attitude." Derek caught Ethan's darkening expression. "Let me guess. His Royal Highness himself. Sometimes I look at Ian and wonder where I went wrong, Ethan admitted. He used to be such a bright, curious kid. Now he's just his mother's clone, Derek supplied gently. Kids make their own choices. Look at Nina. Same parents. Totally different outcome. Ethan nodded, thinking of his daughter's quiet strength that morning. She's the one good thing that came out of this marriage. His computer chimed with an email notification. Victoria had forwarded him a charge notification from their joint credit card. $3,000 at Hyman and Joy. She had gone shopping anyway, probably using the card she claimed was just for emergencies. Document everything, huh? Ethan murmured, opening a new spreadsheet. He began logging the unauthorized charge, along with the date, and Victoria's related messages. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and site visits, but Ethan's mind kept circling back to the impending evening discussion. Around noon, his intercom buzzed. "Mr. Cross, your wife is on line 1. Julie, his secretary, said. She says it's urgent." Ethan picked up the phone, bracing himself. "Victoria." "Finally, why aren't you answering my texts?" Victoria's voice dripped with manufactured distress. "I needed that card, Ethan. I had to use the emergency one. And now Ian needs gas money. He's stranded at the mall. He has a job at the country club specifically to pay for his own gas," Ethan reminded her. "Part of teaching responsibility, remember?" "Oh my goodness. Are you seriously going to be this petty? He quit that job weeks ago. It was beneath him, serving those people." "Those people are your friends, Victoria. That's different, and you know it," she snapped. "Gosh, you're impossible today. Just transfer him some money before he's completely humiliated. And we need to talk about your attitude before tonight. This is supposed to be an exciting discussion about our future, and you're already being difficult." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Our future?" "Yes, and you're going to listen with an open mind. Ian and I have been doing a lot of research about modern marriages and how to keep things exciting. You'll see tonight." Her voice took on that honeyed tone that always preceded her worst ideas. "Just try not to ruin it with your traditional mindset." After hanging up, Ethan stared at his computer screen. The spreadsheet he'd started that morning now included a list of Victoria's recent purchases, unauthorized charges, and manipulative behaviors. Almost without conscious thought, he began adding older incidents. The time she'd maxed out 3 credit cards on a spontaneous trip to Rome with her friends, the way she'd manipulated Ian into becoming her ally against Ethan's controlling behavior, the constant undermining of his parental authority. A knock at his door preceded Julie entering with lunch. "You asked me to remind you about the Thompson contract review at 2, Mr. Cross. And your son called the office 3 times, asking about that gas money. Did he mention what happened to last week's allowance?" "He said." She paused uncomfortably. "He said, and I quote, 'Dad's being a controlling jerk about money again. But Mom says it's okay if we push hard enough.'" Ethan's expression must have changed, because July quickly added, "Sorry, sir. I thought you should know how he's talking about you to others." "No, I appreciate the honesty. Could you do me a favor? Pull all the credit card statements for the past year, personal and business, and any correspondence from Victoria or Ian about financial requests. Of course, should I mark the personal shopping charges separately from household expenses? Please. And Julie, this stays between us." Left alone, Ethan opened his bottom desk drawer and pulled out a business card he had kept hidden for months. A divorce lawyer, recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a messy split. He'd held onto it as a last resort, always hoping things would improve. Now, looking at the embossed lettering, he felt something shift inside him. His phone buzzed with another text from Ian. "Thanks for leaving me stranded, Dad. Real great parenting. Mom's right. You just love controlling everyone with money. Can't wait for tonight's talk. Maybe you'll finally learn how a real man handles relationship growth." Ethan read the message twice, noting the escalating disrespect. The manipulation tactics clearly learned from Victoria. He added it to his growing documentation, along with screenshots of similar messages from the past few months. The afternoon crawled by in a series of meetings and site inspections. Ethan maintained his professional demeanor, but internally, his mind was cataloging years of incidents he'd chosen to overlook for the sake of peace. Every manipulation, every financial deception, every instance of Ian being turned against him, it all formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. At around 4, Derek stopped by his office again. "You okay, boss? You've had that look all day." "What look?" "The same one you get when you realize a foundation is compromised. Like you're calculating how much it'll cost to tear everything down and start over." Ethan smiled grimly. "Maybe I am. Just remember, whatever's coming, you built this company from nothing. You can rebuild anything else too." As the workday wound down, Ethan received one final text from Victoria. "Wearing something special tonight. Try to be home by 7. And please, for once, keep an open mind about what Ian and I have to suggest. It's time for some excitement in our lives." Ethan gathered the financial documents July had compiled, securing them in his briefcase along with the lawyer's card. Whatever Victoria and Ian had planned, he was done being manipulated, done watching his son turn into a mirror image of his mother's worst traits, done maintaining peace at the cost of his self-respect. The drive home felt different this time. Instead of dreading another evening of walking on eggshells, Ethan felt a cold clarity settling over him. He had built his company on solid foundations, but his marriage had been built on shifting sand. Maybe it was time to admit some structures couldn't be saved, and to start planning for a controlled demolition instead. As he pulled into his driveway, he could see lights blazing in every window of their sprawling home. Victoria's car and Ian's DMS were both parked in their usual spots. Through the front window, he caught a glimpse of his wife pacing in one of her more revealing outfits, the kind she only wore when she wanted something. His phone buzzed one last time. A text from Nina. "Dad, Mom and Ian are acting weird. More than usual. Please come home soon." Ethan's grip tightened on his briefcase as he walked toward the front door. Whatever games Victoria and Ian were playing, whatever exciting changes they wanted to propose, he was done being a passive participant in the destruction of his own family. It was time to change the rules. The foyer lights cast dramatic shadows across Victoria's face as Ethan stepped into their house. She'd chosen her weapons carefully. A sleek red dress that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, perfectly styled hair, makeup that emphasized her best features while hiding the signs of age she fought so desperately against. "You're late," she said, but her tone was deliberately soft, almost playful. "Another warning sign." "Traffic," Ethan replied, setting his briefcase down carefully. The documents inside felt like loaded ammunition. Ian lounged against the living room doorway, his pose a studied imitation of casual confidence. "Nice of you to finally show up, Dad. Mom's been waiting." The house smelled of expensive perfume and tension. Through the kitchen doorway, Ethan caught a glimpse of Nina hurrying upstairs, no doubt seeking refuge in her room. "Sit down, honey." Victoria gestured to the armchair, positioning him alone while she and Ian could share the sofa. Classic manipulation tactics, setting up the scene to make him feel isolated. Ethan remained standing. "What's this about, Victoria? Always so direct." She sighed, moving closer with that practiced sway in her step. He stepped back. "That's part of the problem, isn't it? No sense of anticipation. No excitement." "Mom's right." Ian chimed in, right on cue. "Everything's so boring and predictable around here. Same routine, same lifestyle, same everything." Ethan looked between them, his wife of 20 years, and the son who'd become her greatest enabler. The similarities were striking. The same entitled tilt of the chin, the same manipulative gleam in their eyes, the same absolute certainty that they were about to get their way. "And your solution to this boredom is?" Ethan kept his voice neutral, watching them exchange that conspiratorial look he'd grown to hate. Victoria's smile widened as she perched on the sofa's arm, crossing her legs to show them off to best advantage. "You know Jackson from my office. The new account manager. The one you mentioned at the charity gala?" Ethan asked, remembering the tall, obviously wealthy man who'd paid just a little too much attention to his wife. "He asked me out for drinks next week," Victoria announced, watching Ethan's face carefully. When he didn't immediately react, she added, "And I want to say yes." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Ethan could feel Ian's eager anticipation, his son practically vibrating with the desire to jump in and support his mother's latest scheme. "You want to go on a date," Ethan said slowly, each word precise, "with another man." "An open relationship, Dad," Ian explained, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's totally normal nowadays. All the most evolved couples are doing it." "Evolved," Ethan repeated, tasting the word bitterly on his tongue. "Don't be so old-fashioned." Victoria stood, moving to touch his arm. He stepped back. "It's just dinner, maybe drinks. Jackson is very attractive, and he makes me feel appreciated. Unlike you." "Ian?" Ethan looked at his son. "And you're okay with this? Your mother dating other men?" Ian rolled his eyes, the gesture reflecting Victoria's. "Gosh, Dad, stop being so insecure and controlling. Mom needs this. You need to stop holding her back." The familiar refrain. Stop holding her back. Stop controlling her. Stop standing in the way of what she wanted. Ethan had heard it all before, from both of them, in different variations over the years. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the documentation in his briefcase, or the memory of Nina's tears that morning, or simply the accumulated weight of years of manipulation. "If you say no," Victoria added, her voice taking on that wounded tone she perfected, "you're just proving how controlling you really are. A secure man wouldn't feel threatened by this." Ethan stood there, looking at his wife and son, seeing them clearly, perhaps for the first time. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the constant undermining of his position in his own family, it all crystallized into something sharp and clear. "Fine," he said quietly, surprising them both. "Go on your date with Jackson." Victoria's eyes widened slightly. She clearly expected more resistance. "Really?" "Really," Ethan confirmed, his voice steady. "You want freedom. Take it." He turned and walked away, climbing the stairs to his home office. Behind him, he could hear Victoria and Ian's excited chatter, already planning her outfit, discussing details. They didn't notice his expression, didn't see the cold determination settling over his features. In his office, Ethan sat down at his computer and opened the spreadsheet he'd been working on all day. He began typing, methodically adding this latest incident to his documentation. Years of mental notes became concrete evidence, dates and details laid out in stark black and white. A soft knock interrupted his work. Nina stood in the doorway, her young face worried. "Dad? I heard Mom and Ian talking. They said, you agreed." Ethan saved his document and turned to face his daughter. "It's going to be okay, Nina. I promise." She nodded but didn't look convinced. "Mom's talking about buying a new dress for her date." The last word came out bitter and confused. "Let her," Ethan said, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes people have to learn lessons the hard way." Nina moved closer, lowering her voice. "I hate how they act, Dad. Mom and Ian. They're always—" She paused. "Always." "I know," Ethan said, pulling her into a hug. "I know exactly how they are, and things are going to change around here. Soon." As he held his daughter, Ethan's mind was already working, plotting out his next moves. Victoria wanted freedom. He'd give her exactly what she asked for, along with all the consequences that came with it. Downstairs, he could hear Victoria on the phone, her voice excited as she presumably shared her plans with one of her equally shallow friends. Ian's deeper voice chimed in occasionally, the perfect accomplice to his mother's performance. Ethan opened his bottom drawer again, pulling out the divorce lawyer's business card. He had kept it as a last resort, always hoping things would improve. Now, looking at the embossed lettering, he felt nothing but cold certainty. "Dad." Nina's voice was small but determined. "Whatever you're planning, I'm on your side." Ethan smiled at his daughter, seeing in her the strength and clarity that Ian had never developed. "I know you are, sweetheart. And we're going to be just fine." As if to punctuate his words, Victoria's laughter floated up from downstairs, followed by Ian's enabling encouragement. Ethan's smile didn't waver, but it took on an edge sharp enough to cut. Let them laugh. Let them plot and scheme. Let them think they had the upper hand. Ethan had spent years building this life for them, and now he would spend however long it took to make sure they understood exactly what they were about to lose. He picked up his phone and began to dial the lawyer's number. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. Time to show Victoria and Ian that their actions had consequences, and that some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed with manipulation and fake tears. The game was about to change, and for once, Ethan would be the one making the rules. The week leading up to Victoria's date crawled by like a slow-motion train wreck. Ethan watched from a carefully maintained distance as his wife transformed their home into what felt like backstage at a fashion show, with endless outfit changes and constant phone calls to her enabling friends. "What do you think about this one?" Victoria twirled in front of the living room mirror, showing off what had to be the 10th dress she'd bought for the occasion. "Jackson mentioned he loves women in red." "It's perfect, Mom," Ian gushed, hovering in the doorway. "Though maybe a little conservative. You want to make an impression." Ethan sat at the kitchen island, reviewing construction contracts while silently documenting every new charge that pinged his phone. The latest shopping spree had added another $5,000 to their credit card debt. "Ethan," Victoria's voice carried that familiar demanding note, "you could at least pretend to have an opinion on the dress you're wearing to date another man." Ethan looked up, his face carefully neutral. "I think I'll pass." Ian scoffed. "God, Dad, could you be any more passive-aggressive?" "This is exactly why Mom needs to explore her options." "Her options," Ethan repeated, slowly. "Interesting." Victoria's phone chimed with a text. "Jackson's here." She practically bounced with excitement. "He's sending a car service. So classy, unlike someone we know." "Have fun, Mom," Ian called out. "Text me details." The door closed behind her with a final click. Through the window, Ethan watched his wife climb into the waiting car, her red dress a splash of color against the black leather interior. As the car pulled away, he turned to face his son. "What are you smirking about?" Ethan asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Just enjoying the show." Ian lounged against the wall. "Mom's finally getting what she deserves, a taste of real excitement." Ethan moved to his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. "Tell me something, Ian. When did you start hating me?" "What?" The question seemed to throw his son off balance. "Was it when I made you get a job at the country club? When I suggested you earn something for yourself instead of having everything handed to you?" "Oh my gosh," Ian groaned. "Here comes another lecture about responsibility." "No lecture," Ethan interrupted, opening the folder. "Just questions, like, for instance, why did you really quit that job? Was it beneath you? Or was it because they caught you stealing from the register?" Ian's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "The manager called me," Ethan continued, his voice steady. "Wanted to handle it quietly, given our membership status. Said you've been skimming cash for weeks, small amounts, thinking no one would notice. That's a lie. Then there are the credit card statements." Ethan pulled out another paper. "The emergency card your mother gave you. The one you've been using at bars, liquor stores, online gambling sites. Your words are all over your text messages. You're spying on me." Ian's voice cracked slightly. "That's private." "Private? Like the text you sent your friends bragging about how you and your mother were going to put me in my place, helping her set up dates with other men. Mom deserves. Your mother." Ethan's voice turned to steel. Deserves exactly what's coming to her. And so do you. He moved to the front door, entering a code on the new keypad. The lock clicked with finality. What are you doing? Ian demanded, his earlier bravado evaporating. Changing the rules, Ethan replied. You and your mother wanted freedom. Congratulations, you're free to leave, but you're not coming back. What? You can't be serious. Your things are packed. They're in the garage. Your car, which is in my name, stays here. The credit cards are canceled. The bank accounts you and your mother have been draining. Frozen. You can't do this. Ian's voice shook. Mom will never let you. Your mother, Ethan cut him off, is about to learn some hard lessons of her own. And you get to share in those consequences. Ian's face twisted with familiar contempt, but there was fear beneath it now. You're bluffing. This is just another control tactic. Try your key. Ethan gestured to the door. Go ahead. See if it works. Hands trembling slightly, Ian pulled out his house key. It didn't fit the new lock. This is illegal, he sputtered. You can't just throw me out. You're 18, Ethan replied calmly. An adult, one who's been stealing from me, undermining me, and helping his mother destroy our family. Consider this your first lesson in real consequences. I'll call Mom. Ian pulled out his phone, fingers fumbling as he dialed. Mom, Dad's lost his mind. He's changing the locks and saying we can't come back. And Ethan watched his son's face as Victoria presumably absorbed this news. He could hear her shrill voice through the speaker, demanding to talk to him. Put your father on the phone right now. Ian thrust the phone out, his hand shaking. She wants to talk to you. No, Ethan said simply. She wanted freedom to date other men. She's free to do that. She's also free to find a new place to live. Ethan. Victoria's voice screeched from the phone. What do you think you're doing? Goodbye, Victoria, Ethan called out, loud enough for her to hear. Enjoy your date. I hear Maison Fleur is lovely this time of year. He turned and walked away, leaving Ian standing in the foyer with the phone, his mother's increasingly panicked voice filling the silence. Behind him, he heard his son's voice crack. Dad, you can't just. Your things are in the garage, Ethan repeated without turning around. I suggest you call a rideshare or ask one of those friends you love bragging to about disrespecting me. I'm sure they'll be happy to help. This isn't over. Ethan paused at the stairs. You're right about that. This is just the beginning. Tell your mother I said enjoy her freedom. I know I'm going to enjoy mine. He climbed the stairs to his office, Ian's protests and Victoria's tinny screams fading behind him. Inside, he pulled up the security camera feed on his computer, watching as his son finally moved to the garage, face twisted with impotent rage. His phone buzzed. A message from Derek. All set for Friday night. Teams on standby. Phase 1 complete. Ethan typed back. Stand by for Phase 2. On the security feed, he watched Ian struggling with his packed bags, reality finally starting to sink in. The boy's face cycled through anger, disbelief, and the beginning of fear. Gone was the smug superiority, replaced by the dawning understanding that actions had consequences. Let him rage, let him plot with Victoria. They had played their game, thinking they held all the cards. Now it was Ethan's turn, and he was done playing by their rules. Meanwhile, across town, Maison Fleur sparkled with expensive ambience, but Victoria barely noticed the crystal chandeliers or the perfectly pressed linens. Her phone buzzed constantly with increasingly panicked texts from Ian, each more desperate than the last. Everything all right? Jackson asked, his carefully styled hair catching the candlelight. You seem distracted. What? Oh no. Everything's fine. Victoria forced a smile, trying to focus on the man across from her. This was supposed to be her moment of triumph, her declaration of independence. Instead, her stomach churned with growing unease. "You've barely touched your wine," Jackson observed, his own glass nearly empty. "Second thoughts about dinner?" "No, of course not. It's just—" Victoria's phone buzzed again. "Family drama. Nothing important." Jackson's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Family drama on our first date? That's not exactly the evening I had in mind. I'm sorry." Victoria reached across the table, touching his hand. "Let me just check one message, then I'm all yours." The latest text from Ian made her blood run cold. "Mom, he's serious. Everything's locked. Cards canceled. Bank accounts frozen. What do we do?" "Problem?" Jackson asked, withdrawing his hand. "My husband," Victoria admitted, her carefully applied makeup feeling suddenly heavy. "He's being difficult about our arrangement." "Ah." Jackson sat back, his interest visibly cooling. "The husband you said was completely fine with this." "He was. He agreed." "Listen, Jackson. I'm not interested in getting involved in domestic disputes," Jackson said, his tone shifting from charming to businesslike. "When you approached me about dinner, you said this was all above board." "It is. Ethan's just being controlling, trying to ruin my night out by freezing accounts and changing locks." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "That sounds less like controlling and more like consequences." Victoria's face flushed. "You don't understand. My son and we were just trying to—" "Your son?" Jackson's expression hardened. "The one you said was helping you set up dates behind your husband's back." "Not behind his back. We told him that we were going to date other men, whether he liked it or not." Jackson signaled for the check. "Yeah, that's not really the same thing as consent." "Where are you going?" Victoria's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Home." Jackson stood, dropping several bills on the table. "I'm not interested in being a prop in your marital drama. Dinner's on me, but don't contact me again." "But our connection was completely in your head," Jackson finished flatly. "I agreed to dinner because you seemed interesting. Now you just seem toxic. Good luck with your husband." He walked away, leaving Victoria alone at the table, her red dress suddenly feeling like a costume in a play that had gone horribly wrong. Her phone buzzed again. Ian, sending screenshots of his canceled credit cards. With trembling fingers, she opened her banking app. Every account showed the same message: access denied. The red share home was a blur of panic and rage. She texted and called Ethan repeatedly, each message more demanding than the last, but received only silence in return. When the car pulled up to their house, she saw Ian sitting on the front steps, surrounded by packed bags. He stood up as she approached. "He changed everything," Ian said. "The locks, the garage code, even the security system. I can't get in." "Of course you can get in." Victoria marched to the front door, fumbling for a key. It didn't fit. What the heck? Through the window, she could see lights on inside. Furious, she banged on the door. "Ethan, open this door right now." No response. "I swear, if you don't open this door," she yelled, trailing off when she realized he wasn't coming. "Or you'll what?" came a voice behind them. They spun around. Ethan stood in the driveway, and he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, tall, elegant, with an air of quiet confidence that made Victoria's carefully curated appearance feel cheap in comparison. "Who the heck is she?" Victoria demanded. "Donna." The woman replied simply. "Ethan invited me for dinner." "Dinner?" Victoria's laugh held a note of hysteria. "In my house." "My house," Ethan corrected quietly. "My name on the deed. My money that paid for it. Just like my name on the bank accounts you've been draining, and my money you've been spending on your little adventures in ethical non-monogamy." "You can't do this." Ian stepped forward, trying to intimidate with his height. "We live here." "Lived?" Ethan's voice was calm. Past tense. "You wanted freedom from my rules, my stability, my boring lifestyle. Congratulations. You're free. This is illegal. Victoria shrieked. I'm your wife. For now, Ethan smiled coldly. My lawyer will be contacting you Monday morning. Don't worry. I'm sure you and Ian can find a nice apartment with all that freedom you wanted. Mom, do something. Ian's voice shook. Dad, you can't just. Your mother wanted freedom. She can have it, Ethan said. She's also free to learn that actions have consequences. Ethan, please. Victoria switched tactics, her voice softening. Honey, we can talk about this. I made a mistake. No, Ethan cut her off. You made a choice. Several choices, actually. You chose to manipulate me, to turn our son against me, to pursue other men. Now you get to experience the consequences of those choices. Please, she took a step forward, tears threatening. It was just dinner. Nothing happened with Jackson. Because he rejected you. Ethan's smile was knowing. Yes, I heard. Apparently, he's not interested in toxic people who use their children to help them cheat. Victoria's face crumpled. How? How did you know? Ethan laughed softly. You really think Jackson randomly asked you out? That he coincidentally picked your favorite restaurant? I've been planning this for weeks, Victoria. Every detail, every moment, right down to making sure your date would end in humiliation. You set me up. Victoria's voice rose to a screech. No, Ethan's voice hardened. You set yourself up. I just made sure you faced real consequences for once in your life. Dad, Ian tried one last time. You can't just throw us out. Where are we supposed to go? Not my problem, Ethan replied coldly. You're an adult now, remember. So grown up, so evolved, so ready to help your mother destroy our family. Time to experience what real adult life feels like. I'll call the police. Victoria threatened. Go ahead, Ethan gestured to the security cameras. Explain how you're the victim here. I'm sure they'd love to see the evidence I've compiled, the financial records, the text messages, the recordings of you and Ian plotting to humiliate me. I'm sure that will go over well in divorce court. Divorce. Victoria's voice cracked. You can't. I can. And I am. Ethan took Dana's arm. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have dinner reservations. I'd suggest using this time to find a hotel. Your credit cards still work. I left you enough limit for that. At least. This isn't over. Ian called out as Ethan and Dana walked toward the front door. Ethan paused, looking back at his son. You're right. It's not. This is just the beginning. I trusted you both, gave you everything, and you repaid me with betrayal. Now you get to learn what life is like without my support. The door closed behind them with finality, leaving Victoria and Ian standing in the darkness. Through the window, they could see Ethan leading Dana to the dining room, where a candlelit dinner waited. Victoria's phone buzzed one final time. A text from her lawyer. Got your husband's divorce filing. Call me first thing Monday. This doesn't look good for you. She stared at her reflection in the dark window, seeing herself clearly for the first time. The red dress that had felt so empowering now looked desperate. The carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. She had gambled everything on this power play, certain that Ethan would eventually cave like always. Instead, she lost everything. Mom. Ian's voice was small, uncertain. What do we do now? Victoria had no answer. She pushed Ethan too far, thinking she could manipulate him forever. Now they both had to face the consequences of their choices, and for once, there was no talking their way out of it. The game was over, and Ethan had won. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Ethan sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing the final divorce paperwork while his phone buzzed with increasingly desperate messages from Victoria. The court date is set for next week, Samuel Brandt, his attorney, said, laying out another document. Given the evidence we've compiled, I don't anticipate any issues with the division of assets or the custody arrangement for Mena. What about the house? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Completely secure. Your prenup was ironclad, and we have extensive documentation of Mrs. Cross's financial misconduct. The property stays with you. Ethan's phone lit up with Ian's name. Declining the call, he watched a text appear instead. You can't ignore us forever. Mom's a mess. Is this what you wanted? To see us suffer? Your son's persistent, Samuel observed. The restraining order is ready if you want it. Not yet, Ethan replied. Let them stew for a while. Reality is the best teacher. The door opened as Samuel's assistant entered. Mr. Cross, your wife is in the lobby. Again. She's demanding to speak with you. Ethan checked his watch. Right on schedule. Send her up in 5 minutes. Let's show her exactly what she's lost. When Victoria burst through the door, she was a far cry from the polished manipulator of the previous week. Her designer outfit couldn't hide the strain around her eyes or the tremor in her hands. How dare you? She started, then stopped at the sight of the documents spread out before Ethan. What is all this? Your future, Ethan replied calmly. Or rather, your lack of one with me. Ethan, please. Her voice shifted to a familiar pleading tone. Can we talk about this privately? Without lawyers. Like we talked about your date with Jackson. Ethan's smile held no warmth. Or how about how you and Ian talked about me behind my back? That was a mistake. I never meant to get caught, Ethan finished. Or to face consequences, or to lose your cushy lifestyle. Mr. Cross has been more than generous in the settlement offer, Samuel interjected smoothly. Considering the circumstances. Generous. Victoria's laugh held a hysterical edge. He's destroying us. Do you know where Ian and I are living? Some terrible extended stay motel. My own son is sleeping on a pull-out couch. Better than he deserves. Ethan's voice hardened. How's he enjoying his first taste of real life? No DMS, no credit cards, no daddy's money to bail him out. He's your son. No, Ethan stood, his height forcing Victoria to step back. He stopped being my son the moment he started plotting with you to destroy our marriage. The moment he decided to help his mother date other men. The moment he chose your toxic influence over basic human decency. I made a mistake. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time. We both did, but punishing Ian isn't punishment. Ethan cut her off. It's education, something you never bothered to give him. Well, now he gets to learn what life is like without my support. Consider it the first real parenting either of us has done for him. The settlement offer expires at 5 p.m., Samuel added. After that, we proceed with full disclosure of evidence in court, including the recordings. Recordings. Victoria's face paled. What recordings? Ethan pulled out his phone, pressing play on a clip. Ian's voice. Mom deserves better than settling for mediocrity. Victoria's laughter. That's right, honey. And once your father sees me with Jackson, he'll finally understand what he's losing. You recorded us. Victoria's voice cracked. In my own home, Ethan confirmed. Perfectly legal, especially when there's suspicion of conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Fraud. She sputtered. What fraud? The credit cards you gave Ian without my knowledge. Ethan's voice was steel. The accounts you drained for your shopping sprees. The lies you told to get cash advances. Take your pick. Victoria sank into a chair, clutching her designer purse like a shield. What do you want from me? Nothing, Ethan replied simply. Not anymore. Sign the papers, take the settlement, and stay away from me and Nina. Nina. Victoria's head snapped up. Where is she? I want to see my daughter. Your daughter wants nothing to do with you. Ethan's voice turned arctic. She's seen exactly who you are. A manipulative narcissist who turned her brother into a mirror image of your worst traits. You turned her against me. No, Victoria. You did that all by yourself. Every time you belittled her. Every time you favored Ian. Every time you showed her exactly how toxic a mother could be. The door opened again, revealing Ian. He looked disheveled, his usually perfect hair uncombed, his designer clothes wrinkled from sleeping on a motel sofa. "Dad," he started, then stopped at Ethan's raised hand. "Unless you're here to sign as a witness to your mother's divorce agreement, you have no reason to be in this room." "This is insane." Ian's voice cracked. "You can't just throw away 20 years of marriage." "Watch me." Ethan turned back to Victoria. "Sign the papers, take the settlement, or we can do this the hard way, with every detail of your behavior made public in court. Your choice." "Choice?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "Like you gave me a choice about Jackson." "No, Victoria." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "Like you gave me a choice about watching my wife and son destroy our family. The difference is, my choices come with power behind them. Real power, not the manipulative games you play." "Mom," Ian moved beside her, his voice finally showing real fear. "Maybe we should just sign. We can't keep living at that motel." "Listen to your son." Ethan's smile was cold. "He's finally learning something useful. Actions have consequences." Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for the pen. "I never thought you'd actually do this." "That was your mistake," Ethan replied. "You thought you could push forever without pushing me away. You thought my patience was weakness. Now you know better." The pen scratched across the paper, each signature another nail in the coffin of their marriage. When she finished, Victoria stood on shaky legs. "What happens now?" "Now." Ethan gathered the papers, handing them to Samuel. "You leave. Both of you. Find an apartment, get jobs, learn to live without my money. Create the exciting life you wanted so badly." "Dad, please." Ian tried one last time. "We can fix this." "No." Ethan cut him off. "We can't. You made your choice, Ian. You chose her side, helped her plan dates with other men, celebrated the idea of humiliating me. Now you live with that choice." "But I'm your son." "No." Ethan's voice was final. "You're her son. You chose that role, played it perfectly. Now you get to keep playing it, without my money to cushion the fall." As they left the office, Ethan watched through the window as Victoria and Ian made their way to their waiting rideshare. No more luxury cars, no more easy escapes. Their faces showed the first real understanding of what they'd lost. His phone buzzed with a text from Dana. "Dinner tonight. Nina's asking for her dad." Looking at the message, Ethan felt the first real smile of the day touch his lips. Sometimes ending one chapter was the only way to begin a better one. The game was over. His move had been devastating, complete, and he had never felt more free. 3 weeks after the divorce papers were signed, Ethan sat in his favorite coffee shop across from Derek, watching Victoria through the window. His ex-wife stood at a bus stop, her designer purse now obviously a knockoff, her perfect makeup no longer so perfect. She boarded the bus with none of the confidence she once displayed. "Still feeling righteous?" Derek asked, stirring his coffee. "Feeling nothing," Ethan replied truthfully. "That's the difference between us now. She still affects nothing in my life." His phone buzzed with Ian's daily attempt to contact him. "Found a job at the mall. Minimum wage. Is this what you wanted? To see us suffer?" "Your boy's persistent," Derek noted. "How's that going?" "He's not my boy anymore." Ethan deleted the message without responding. He made his choice. Now he can live with it. The bell above the door chimed as Dana entered. Her smile grew when she spotted Ethan. Unlike Victoria's calculated gestures, everything about Dana rang true, from her genuine pleasure at seeing him to the quiet confidence in her stride. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the booth beside Ethan. "Parent-teacher conference ran long." "Oh, is that?" She gestured toward the window. "Yep." Ethan watched dispassionately as Victoria's bus pulled away. "Heard she's working retail now. Quite a change from her country club lifestyle." Nina mentioned Ian called her again. Dana said carefully, "Trying to get her to convince you to help them." Ethan's jaw tightened. Did she talk to him? No, Dana smiled. She said, and I quote, "I don't need toxic people in my life anymore." Smart girl, your daughter. At 13, Nina showed more emotional intelligence than Victoria had managed in 40 years. Pride filled Ethan's chest. When did she get so wise? Probably around the time she realized what real love looks like, Dana said gently. It's not manipulation or control. It's support and respect. Ethan's phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Cross, this is Randy from Luxury Motors. Your ex-wife is here, trying to lease a car using your name as a reference. Standard protocol is to verify. Ethan texted back a single word. Declined. Everything okay? Dana asked, noticing his satisfied expression. Perfect. Ethan took her hand as they walked to the car. Just watching karma do its work. Later that evening, at Derek and Hannah's house, Ethan watched Nina help set the table, laughing at something Hannah had said. The scene was so different from the tense dinners of the past. No manipulation, no underlying agenda, just genuine warmth and connection. Penny for your thoughts? Dana asked, bringing a salad bowl to the table. Just thinking about choices, Ethan replied. And consequences. Speaking of consequences, Derek called from the kitchen. Saw your ex-wife's DMS at the impound lot today. Guess those missed payments finally caught up with her. Dad. Nina's voice was hesitant. Do you ever feel bad about how things turned out for them? Mom and Ian. Ethan considered his answer carefully. I feel bad that they chose to be the kind of people who would try to destroy our family. I feel bad that Ian learned all the wrong lessons from his mother. But do I feel bad about holding them accountable? No, never. Good, Nina said firmly. Because they don't deserve forgiveness. Not after everything they did. Forgiveness isn't always the answer, Dana added, taking the seat. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. It's the only way they might learn. Through the dining room window, Ethan saw the sun setting over the neighborhood. Somewhere across town, Victoria and Ian were probably in their small apartment, learning hard lessons about life without his support. Let them learn. Let them struggle. Let them finally understand that actions have consequences. Here, in this moment, with Nina safe and happy, with Dana's quiet strength beside him, with true friends who understood loyalty. This was all the vindication he needed. His phone lay silent in his pocket. No more manipulative texts, no more demands, no more drama. The peace he'd fought for had finally arrived, not through forgiveness, but through the courage to say enough was enough. Some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed, but sometimes that was necessary to build something better from the ruins. 6 months after the divorce, Ethan stood in his office at Cross Construction, reviewing plans for their newest venture. The hillside development had become their most successful project yet, proving that life improved dramatically when you cut out toxic influences. A knock at his door preceded Julie's entrance. Mr. Cross, you have visitors. I don't have any appointments this morning, Ethan replied, not looking up from the blueprints. It's your ex-wife and son, Julie said, her tone wary. They're quite insistent. Ethan checked a security feed. Victoria and Ian stood in the lobby, both showing signs of their reduced circumstances. Victoria's hair was noticeably overdue for a salon visit, her clothes clearly from a discount rack. Ian's designer swagger was replaced by slumped shoulders. Send them up, Ethan decided. Might as well end this once and for all. When they entered, the contrast between past and present was stark. Gone was Victoria's entitled confidence, replaced by barely concealed desperation. Ian couldn't even meet his father's eyes. Well, Ethan leaned back in his chair. This should be interesting. We need to talk, Victoria started, then faltered under his gaze. We're struggling, Ethan. Really struggling. You think this is cruel? Ethan stood slowly. Crueler than plotting to humiliate me. then turning my son against me, then destroying our family for your ego. Ian stepped forward, desperation clear on his face. Dad, please, I know we messed up. I know I was awful to you. But I'm your son. Stop saying that. Ethan slammed his hand on the desk, making them both jump. You lost the right to call me Dad the moment you helped your mother plan dates with other men. The moment you celebrated the idea of humiliating me. The moment you chose her toxic influence over basic respect. We've changed. Victoria tried again, her voice trembling. These past months have taught us. Taught you what? Ethan laughed coldly. That actions have consequences. That you can't manipulate your way through life. That maybe, just maybe, treating people with respect matters more than your ego. Yes, Ian exclaimed. Yes, exactly that. I wake up every day hating myself for what I did, for who I was. Please just give us a chance. A chance. Ethan walked around his desk, watching them both shrink back. Like the chance you gave me, to watch my wife date other men, to hear my son mock everything I provided. Those kinds of chances. Victoria's tears started falling in earnest. We're drowning here. Just help us get started again. A small loan, or talk to your contacts about a job for Ian. Please. No. The word fell like a gavel. Final. But, Ian started. Let me be perfectly clear. Ethan's voice was ice. You're never getting another cent from me. Never getting another opportunity. Never getting another chance to worm your way back into my life with your toxicity. We'll change, Victoria whispered. No, you won't. Ethan cut her off. You're here because you want your comfortable life back, not because you genuinely understand what you did wrong. Not because you're truly different, but because being poor is inconvenient. That's not fair, Ian insisted weakly. Fair. Ethan turned to his son. Was it fair when you helped your mother plan dates with other men? When you mocked everything I worked for? When you chose her toxic influence over basic decency? Silence hung in the office, broken only by Victoria's quiet sobs. Here's what's going to happen, Ethan continued, his tone coldly professional. You're going to leave my office. You're going to delete my number. You're going to stop trying to manipulate Nina into advocating for you. And you're going to live with the consequences of your choices. Forever. Forever. Victoria repeated weakly. Consider it the price of betrayal, Ethan said. Now get out. But Dad, Ian tried one last time. Get out. Ethan turned back to his blueprints. Don't come back. Through the security feed, he watched them leave, shoulders slumped, designer confidence finally shattered. His phone buzzed with a text from Dana. Dinner tonight. Nina got an A on her science project. Ethan smiled. Sometimes you had to break away from what was poisoning you to find what truly matters. He had built his own success from nothing once before. He had built a new life from the ashes of Victoria's betrayal, and he'd build something better than anything her toxicity had destroyed. Sienna, now Victoria, and Corbin, now Ian, had made their choices. They could live with them. Ethan was finally free to thrive, surrounded by real love, real respect, and the future he deserved. Some broken things should stay broken. He tucked his phone away and focused on the plans for the hillside development, a tangible symbol of how something strong and beautiful could rise from crumbling foundations. For once, he felt at peace. The game was over, the lessons were learned, and Ethan Cross had never been happier. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.